Hello and welcome to part 2 of the devlog of my project called MIN-0. We're still in the very early prototypes. In part 1 I basically looked at how to make a ship move and see if I liked it. In this part I want to see if the ship is fun to fly, so what I want to do is design some sort of race-like course, or basically a map that we can go around quite fast and see how it feels, and just basically see if it feels right and fun to use. So I started off by expanding my tileset. This was my original ones, and what I wanted to do is get some curves in there. So I've kind of got an inside and an outside curve. These are all made to join up in the centre with the other centre blocks, so they should also join up with each other. So I should be able to, for example, take this one down here and then from this one sort of go outwards, so you can then get more of a curve. That's the theory anyway. But when I actually got to thinking about designing a level, I thought, actually, I don't want to put all the effort into making this smooth. I should just draw it out with just a block and see what happens. Again, Godot's pretty good at tile maps. What I did is just drag in my new version of the PNG file. It retained all the information, like the collide information about these. Then I just had to select these ones as tiles. You can see these ones here, which means they're not selected as tiles, and then do the collider from them. So that was pretty good. Anyway, what I did is stick my little ship on that. I've got a new version of the ship. It's called no cam, because the cam was part of the ship. I thought, actually, that's no good because that already has limits on it. But rather than mess around with it, I'll take the camera off that one and I'll try on this one and give it a run and see how it feels. So just testing this out, and it feels okay in terms of how the ship feels in sort of weightiness and the thrust. But I'm concerned that it's not quite agile enough. It's not turning fast enough. I'm just on a keyboard here, so like a left button, right button and thrust. So I didn't want to get it too fast, but this doesn't feel like you could throw it around the corners as if it was a race course. It's also, I'm thinking, a little bit zoomed in, so I might need to look at that as well. And the other thing I'm thinking about is, should I look at the analog implementation, a trigger for the thrust, an analog joystick to turn it left and right on a varying thing. So still on keyboard controls, and what I've done, I've just changed the torque so it rotates a little bit faster, and I've zoomed out a little bit just to give a bit more of an impression about what's coming up. And this feels a little bit better. I feel like I can sort of drift around the corners, as it were, and it feels a little bit more agile. So this feels good. I think I should try putting some actual curves in rather than just blockiness now in the map. Well, I didn't get too far into this before I found the problem with it, and you can probably see what it is here, and that's the tiles I've got. Although I said, they easily interconnect on the straights, that's fine, but they have to complete their right angle before they do it, so I don't have any way of breaking out, and as such I get this weird wiggly waggly sort of line there. The other problem with it, it's far too clean like that. It just goes on, and it's too, well, it looks like a bunch of wiggly worms, doesn't it? That's not right. So after several iterations in Sprite, I came up with some extra bits. I've got some small bits that finish off some of the inside or outside curves and right angles, and then I've got link bits for the diagonals and trying to work out how to go from a small curve into a curve on the other side. I've gone ahead and drawn those out for myself so I can tell what's going on. And I went and put that into the map, which took a long time, frankly. There is like auto mapping, but you basically define what is your straight, what's a corner, that sort of thing. It doesn't quite work for this. And I still don't like it. If we go ahead and play it, it's looking better than it did. It's still a bit weird and irregular with the sort of curves we've got, and it still looks way too clean. So what I actually thought when I looked at this is maybe it's not that. Maybe it's because it's so plain it needs a bit of depth. Maybe I can add a parallax background, and that seems to be quite easy in Godot. You add this thing called parallax background, and then you have lots of layers. And of course, if you're in a 2D game sort of going along horizontally, you might have multiple layers. With this, I just have one layer, and then I give it a sprite, and it is a texture, what I did find on the internet, which was free for use, and it's 1024 pixels high and wide. So what you do in the layer is then say mirroring is on 1024, and if we do that, you sort of see it fill in a bit there, and if we play it, it all goes horribly wrong. It's like, why are you not drawing in the right place? And the reason for this, I eventually figured out, is because my resolution of my viewport is greater than 1024, and the parallax background can't handle it. So in order to like fill it up, I have to add multiple parallax backgrounds which work in different sort of ways. So what I end up with is 6 parallel layers. My first one mirroring at 1024, and then my second one having an offset of 1024 on the Y, and then goes to 2048 on the Y, and ditto with like the X. So if it's 1024 offset, then the mirroring's on 2048, which didn't make much sense to me. If I play that, it almost works. I say almost. There is apparently something that says Godot will not draw any more than 2, and if your screen is big enough, look, just down here, I just get this place where I can get that little blob of the wrong screen, which is really annoying. And I thought, this is silly, this is far too much effort. So what I ended up doing instead is taking the sprite, which was 1024, and basically making it into 4, which is now 2048 by 2048, and having that as a single parallax layer. And then what we get is something where you can't see the joins effectively, and you get some parallax scrolling. Again, this wouldn't be my intention for it because we're not in space. We're sort of underground in, you know, a sort of structure. So we'd have sort of structure things going on in the background. But it sort of works. It seems weird that I have to use such a big texture for it to work just because the resolution isn't good enough. I've added the limits to the map so it doesn't scroll too far. I've increased the rotation of the ship just a little bit more so it feels right. But at this point, I'm like, I still don't like the tiles I've got. It still looks a mess to me, and that brown is sickly. It needs to be some sort of more organic colour. So I'm still thinking I still need to go back to Aseprite and do something about these curves. If we're going to have curves, then we're going to have big, like graceful curves, not these little squiggly things still. So this is just wrong. So I went back into Aseprite again, and I changed the colour to sort of a darker, reddier brown, and I had some sort of larger curves. I basically said, well, this curve is like 2 to turn, so the next one's going to be sort of 6 to turn, to see if I could make the curves a bit more graceful. So this gives us this sort of reddier look, which I think is not bad. And it was this time as well that I put the extra analog input in. So what I've got now is I can thrust on the analog trigger of a joystick. I've got an Xbox One joystick here, and if I turn, then I should be able to turn slow or fast. Although there's a big dead zone on these sticks. One problem I then picked up as I'm going along, you might be able to see it. I don't know how well YouTube will compress it, but there seems to be some jitter in the ship. It's sort of it's almost like it's the movement behind on the tiles is good, but the ship seems to be sort of jittering, and this seems to be down to something called position smoothing and scrolling. So this is the camera 2D, and we've got a position smoothing of 5 pixels enabled. This basically means that it won't sort of fix directly onto the ship itself. It make it feel a little bit more natural. If I turn that off, then it's perfectly smooth, but it's too fixed. There's absolutely no movement on the ship unless you get to these sort of limits. It's just there, and it feels very unnatural. So I want that on, but I want it smooth. And this seems to be down to something that seems to pop up quite often. It's only happened in Unity. So there's 2 loops in the game. There's this sort of main game loop that runs, you know, as fast as it can, and that's why we use delta time to decide how far we move stuff depending on how much time has gone through. And then there's the physics loop, which runs strictly once every 60th of a second. And we've got the background controlled by the main loop, which is running as fast as it can, and the ship controlled by the physics loop, which is only running once every 60th of a second. And because we're trying to update at those two different rates, we can get jitter from the ship. As luck would have it, this is not an uncommon thing. People know about this. And so we've got this thing from Lawn Jelly called Smoothing Add-on, which aims to basically sort it out, the issues between the physics loop and the main game loop. So I've added that into my code. And now with smoothing on, so we get a nice natural camera movement around the ship, and the smoothness on, basically we don't get any of that jitter. So that's that bit sorted. I still don't like what I'm seeing in terms of the tile map. I figure it's not that much of a problem because the whole thing's not going to be tile mapped. There's going to be other graphics sort of around to support the tiles. So maybe I'm getting a little bit hung up on things. And I also thought maybe, like, you know, things look better if it's like lit properly or stuff. So what I did, I added a directional light, which is basically the sort of overall ambience, or the sunlight if you like, and I've turned that right down. And then I had a sort of internal light lighting up via my ship so I could see what I was doing. This is more of a sort of test to think, oh, will things look right if things are a little bit better? Does it give a little bit more atmosphere? And the answer is, not really. And I've got it set up here. So normally you'd have the light occluded by the background, but I've let that sort of shine through so you can sort of turn up little bits of it. And it looks alright. You know, you get nicer graphics there, and I think it will look better. So I'm going to turn this all off while I continue prototyping. But it was just a case of saying, is this going to look a little dirty? You can see I've got another light for the thrust there, so it lights up a little bit more. It's actually a red light, but it doesn't really show up. So this is a basic prototype. Does the ship feel okay flying around? And the answer is pretty much yeah. I kind of like it. So the question is, what do I work on next? So that's the devlog for this part, and it feels kind of okay. I don't like the graphics or the terrain, but the ship feels generally okay. So what I did is create myself a little Trello chart to decide what the main items I wanted to think about on the prototyping are, and what were the important ones. So the most important, and I've come up with a key of easy, medium, hard, is transitioning between scenes. So when you go for a door, you need to load in another scene that has the next part over. It's not quite as simple as just sort of going through and having a new scene, because we've got to think about the metadata. It could be that we've had a power up in that room. Has the power up been picked up? Where do I store this information? There's a kind of this global idea in Godot. So I've coloured that in medium because it's kind of a fact that there's a lot of stuff I don't know there. It's also blocked by doors opening and closing, because in order to go through a scene we need doors to open and close, and in doors opening and closing we are blocked by the basic weapon firing, because I figure that's how you're going to go through a door, you're going to fire at it. So the thing to do next, I think, is the basic weapon firing, and I'm going to aim to do the doors and transitioning between scenes on the next part as well, because I think that transitioning is very important to figure out how I'm going to store my list of basically the game state, and you know, how much has been revealed, and that then ties into the map, because the map has to show bits that you've discovered and hide bits that you haven't, and that sort of thing. Anyway, that'll be next time. If you like what you see, please feel free to give me a like and subscribe, and shove some comments down below. I will catch you next one. Bye for now.